Have you ever thought that the world is going mad? That it's lurching from crisis to crisis? That common sense and rationality seem to have vanished? Is the world out of control? Or is it perhaps under the control of people we cannot control? What's really going on? For those who want to look behind the headlines and hear the questions asked which no one dares ask, this is the Laughland Report. Well, hello everyone. In the Amsterdam studio today, I'm delighted to welcome Thierry Baudet, who is the leader of Forum for Democracy, the most intelligent and most dynamic political party in Europe today. Thierry is, without any doubt, one of the most well-known politicians in the Netherlands, and I'm almost certain, Thierry, that you are the only, or certainly one of the very rare European politicians to have campaigned against every single aspect of COVID, the lockdowns, the masks, the distancing, and the vaccines. And you wrote a book about this, which was a bestseller in the Netherlands, and which is shortly going to be published in English. But you changed the title. You call it in Dutch the Corona trick. I think that's scam. Yeah. But you've called it in English the Corona conspiracy. What's the conspiracy?
The conspiracy is the plan of both Big Pharma and big government to use this thing, this initial panic. I leave that open actually in the book. I say, look, we don't know to what extent it was actually planned in advance, but the moment it occurred, and there are lots of indications actually that it was planned, but let's just leave that particular point aside. But the moment it occurred, they used this obviously to push an agenda, and that agenda is the agenda for globalist totalitarianism. And it's very obvious from almost everything, and this is why this is the only reason actually why I doubt the title, because there's something about a conspiracy which is that it's meant to be a secret. And the thing about this conspiracy is that it's out in the open. They do write about this. They do put it in their reports. They say it at their conferences in Davos and elsewhere. The people that are in the deciding institutions across the Western world, at least, and maybe even beyond that, believe in central planning, in central technocracy. They don't believe in national identities and national sovereignty and national democracies. They feel that their scientists and their little groups of experts should govern the world, and that all of these democratic or whatever you call them, white or Western or Christian civilizational things, such as freedom of speech, such as private property, such as no representation, taxation without representation, and those kind of things. That they all belong to the past. That used to be. Now we just have to make sure we control the people into the direction that we know is best for them, and that's the direction we're heading. And it's a frightening scenario. And COVID showed everything. COVID was the epitomal moment. Yeah. It was the moment of truth.
In the book, and just now you've placed a little question mark over to what extent it was planned. But in the book, I think you do show that the initial panic, if indeed that was just panic, unprepared, was artificially prolonged, for example, by inflating the figures on infection and possibly even the figures on deaths. What do you say to people? Because a lot of people listening to us will say, "What are you talking about? There were millions of people died. How can you possibly claim?" So
I think that's a great question. So one of the things that I do in the book is to take the statistics. And this is always the trick, isn't it? Because any statistic has a y-axis and an x-axis. And whenever you see people on Twitter shilling cryptocurrencies or whatever, you always have to look what's the y-axis and the x-axis. Yeah. And this is precisely the thing with, for example, excess deaths.
Yes.
Whenever they say there was excess death, they would say that compared to 2019, for example, 2020 was an excessive year. Lots of people died. But then the thing is, excess death is the number of deaths in excess of the whatever previous category you take. And if the years 2018 and 2019, which was the case, had mild winters and particularly mild flu seasons, this was a typical thing, then it's logical that the year 2020 will have excess death, because the people that would have statistically died, normally speaking, in 2018, 2019, that will die in 2020. And of course, it's always tragic when people die, but if you take a much longer period of time, let's say 20 years, you see, and I do that in the book, I take all the statistics from Britain, from Wales, from the Netherlands, from France, Germany. You see that there was absolutely nothing.
Exactly, and we knew from very early on, and you show this as well in the book. We've known from very early on. We knew within, I think, the first month, certainly the first couple of months, that the mortality rate, the death rate from COVID was below 1%. So we were not dealing with a killer virus.
Yeah, and still,
and yet the fear
panic.
was exactly.
So there are several roads of explaining this. Modern, I would say, it's like comparable maybe to the witch hunts in the Middle Ages or other mass hysterical phenomena that we think of as the past. But there were several causes of this. And one is obviously the corruption of science. And scientists like Neil Ferguson in Britain, for example, or Tom Frieden in the United States, or many other people in the Netherlands, we had to say, feeling that they could finally, grab control over society. They had been dealing with numbers and in laboratory, and now all of a sudden they were important people in the world. So there's a psychological element there. The second element is that there is a lot of evidence, and Michael Sanger, the American researcher, did a lot of great work on this, that the Chinese political system, especially the Communist Party in China, did actually manipulate consciously through their social media bots and other mechanisms the opinion forming processes in the West to manipulate people into supporting lockdown and so on. There's a lot of evidence in this. But the third and most important reason, and that's actually the main point I try to make in the book, is that I believe that Western elites across the board, so this is the case in Europe, it's the case in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, across the Western world, elites have actually surreptitiously adopted this ideology of globalist control. And they feel that democratic societies are impractical, they're decentralized, so how can you really make global change? They're short-sighted, short-termed by definition, because every 4 or 5 years you have elections, you have other parties in power. So there has been a revolution in mindset, and this is true in academic circles, in political circles, journalistic circles, civil servants, across the board, banking circles. The elites do not believe in national democracy anymore, and they felt that this was their moment. Yeah, and they took it.
And they don't believe in freedom. They think that freedom is dangerous. They think that freedom needs to be managed, and so on. Yeah. But if it's true, as I agree with you, that this is a very broad problem, as you've said, it involves a large number of governments, a large number of people in governments, it involves other sectors like big pharma, then it's really I would say a deeper cultural problem rather than a conspiracy. It's the result of, no doubt, many years of, drip feeding about climate hysteria, about overpopulation and so on. Yeah. And certainly I felt, and I'm sure you did too, that perhaps the most disturbing, apart from all the implications of social control and the totalitarianism, almost the most disturbing fact was that these policies were supported by a large section of the population, by majorities.
Yeah. So basically you're asking two questions, if I understand correctly. The first question, I think it's true, apart from being a conspiracy, it's also simply an ideological development that has taken place for decades And we've seen it with the European Union, which is a conspiracy of its own.
Yeah.
A conspiracy to dismantle
Exactly.
national democracies and national sovereignties. We've seen it with the mass immigration movements, which is a conspiracy to destroy our ethnic homogeneity and the social fabric of our societies. We've seen it with the Black Lives Matter, which was supported from above,
Yep.
George Soros
Yep.
and other people, which is a conspiracy to destroy our national histories, our identities, and so on. So we see it across the board. The climate change mystique, the hocus pocus about carbon dioxide. It's a conspiracy to destroy our economic system and to penetrate it with state interference. It's a watermelon. It's green from the outside. It's red from the inside. It means socialist control. So this too. The COVID conspiracy. It's a perfect example of something much larger that has been going on for decades, and that's why I thought it was so important to write this book. Now, your second question.
Yeah, about the people. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't miss that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a democratic politician, so in that sense, I love the fact that we have the ability to participate in elections, to show that there is a significant group of people in the Netherlands, in my country, but we've also seen it elsewhere, who do feel differently. They can go to the voting box and they can let themselves heard. On the other hand, I do feel that there is a very large group of people, not just in the Netherlands, but all over the world, who are easily manipulated, who feel that their direct self-interests in whatever promises incumbent politicians may make. We will cut taxes, or like George Herbert Bush Sr. Read my lips, no more taxes, and people they go vote for it. So there is definitely an element there. So my view is that democracy is obviously the only means by which we can have peaceful transitions of power. But the transitions of power, the transitions of ideology, do not happen through the voting process, but they happen through a cultural revolution. As Antonio Gramsci famously said, is a long march through the institutions. So my view is we have to do both.
Yeah.
We have to be present in the political domain.
That's very good.
It's impossible not to do that. We have to do that. We have to participate in elections. We have to put forward candidates, and we've been doing that, Forum for Democracy, and we've been trying to work together with our partners across Europe and elsewhere. I've been a great supporter of Donald Trump, for example. I think he was an exceptional politician. But we cannot do it without people like you, without the movement, without books, without schools, without educational institutions, without journalists, without across the board a cultural march through the institutions, and that's maybe the final thought, or one additional thought about COVID, because one of the things that happened during COVID, and I felt this in my veins, was that we were all in the same boat. The French, you live in France, the Americans, the British, the Germans. All of a sudden we realized lockdowns are coming for all of us.
Yes.
Vaccination obligations are coming for all of us. So now, I mean, we're in the summer of 2022, but there is a new movement coming about. We are connecting. We are sort of, okay, we may not agree on everything. We may speak different languages. We may have different creeds, religions, ethnicities, whatever. But we're fighting the same enemy. It's the globalist, totalitarian, planetary usurpation of power, the top-down control, the transhumanist agenda, the social credit system based on the Chinese model. This is what the future has in store for us. And we have one opportunity to fight it, and we have to do it together. And that's, even though I like to present myself as a pessimist, and there are two reasons for that. One is self-expression. It's a basic human need. But the other is to give the audience a feeling that, look, it really has to come from you guys.
Yeah.
You guys have to do, don't just look at me.
Yeah.
Don't just admire me or whatever, like my videos.
Yeah.
Do something. So there's also a tactical reason for me to be a pessimist.
Yeah.
But this is actually one of the few things that make me feel positive, that I do feel we have sort of started to connect.
Yeah.
And through that process, that's the ultimate answer to your question, in time, democratic changes may occur.
Yeah, and of course, one of the components, everybody knows this, of democracy is the media and is free speech and so on. And COVID showed us, didn't it, how degraded,
Yeah.
not just how degraded and how dangerous the censorship has become, but how you mentioned the witch trials, but you know how the crowd, the crowd started to throw
call for
stones,
lockdowns.
exactly, to call for lockdowns and to shout down the few dissident voices that were heard at the beginning, and that was also one of the most frightening things. And of course, we're trying in this Laughland Report to fight back a little bit on the media front.
That's one of the fears that I have, John, that we're going to lose the free internet.
Yes.
I think the free internet might be something that people will talk about in museums in 50 years.
Yes.
You know, oh, there were 10 years where they had free internet.
Yes.
And that's why I think it's really important that people like you, they subscribe to your newsletter, because I think email newsletters are going to be the last things that are going to be open to people like us. I think YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all these platforms and Google, obviously, are increasingly going to be censored. And I really think the future is censorship, and I'm very scared of that from two perspectives, or for two reasons. The first is obviously my own perspective, that I'm one of those people who will be censored. But the second is maybe more general, that I'm the kind of conservative who does have a weakness for the Enlightenment.
Yes.
What keeps on striking me, and this is maybe a particular thing for the Dutch, the French have a different view, but people like Montesquieu and Voltaire and Rousseau, these French Enlightenment thinkers, and also people from Britain and elsewhere, they were unable to publish their books at the time in the 18th century and before in their respective nations. So they went to the Netherlands.
Yes, absolutely.
And the Netherlands became a center of innovative thought. And there's a great quote, I think it's from John Stuart Mill, but this is the quote is, "I don't see the point in fighting an opinion or countering an opinion by forbidding it. There's no way countering an opinion."
Exactly. Well, that was exactly Mill's view.
I forgot the exact phrasing, but this is such a typical. So I'm actually a free speech absolutist. I really feel that this is the only way in which we can.
Well, this is an important part of your profile and of the profile of FVD International. It's based in the Netherlands.
Also in my book.
In the Netherlands, which has a reputation, which everybody knows is one of the oldest free countries in the world.
But I describe in my book, and this is maybe something that not all the viewers know, but I describe how initially I was convinced that COVID was very dangerous. I changed my mind.
Yes.
And I feel that the ability to change your mind as a consequence of arguments.
True. That's a very nice part of the book.
That's a democratic quality.
Yeah,
I feel
exactly.
I've at least one democratic quality. It's being able to change your mind, and that's so important. That if we're going to live in ages of censorship, it won't just be the end of us. It will mean the end of people being able to change their minds as a consequence of differing arguments, and that would be a terrible tragedy for mankind as a whole, for progress, for any form of intellectual development. So it's a much broader argument than just a particular argument for people like us.
I mentioned at the beginning, and perhaps this will be the closing point, that you campaigned against every single aspect, and I concluded with the vaccines. Now we're in August 2022. The book was written before that. The English version, of course, was written a little bit later and updated, but there is still a lot of information coming out about the vaccines, which by definition won't. Some of it is in there, but it won't all be in there.
Of course.
What do you want to say to the viewers about the vaccines? Because there were other political parties, I'm thinking of the Freedom Party in Austria, for example, who were hostile to lockdowns, but they were liberal on vaccines. I mean, they said it doesn't matter if you want to get vaccinated. Your position was always do not take the vaccine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And would you like to conclude and explain that and say what you think, because the data is coming out now.
Yeah.
How do you see this data developing in the next, let's say, couple of months?
So there's lots of things to say about the vaccines, but they've taken the only element of the coronavirus, the spike protein, which is actually toxic,
Yeah.
as the basic element with which to trigger the human immune system with the mRNA structure. They've put that into nanoparticles, which immediately spread across the entire body,
Yes.
therefore cause an almost endless number of possible counter side effects, which we've seen. I mean, there is no single vaccine in the history of medicine with even a factor 10 this number of side effects. And these are only the short-term effects. There's a long-term effect, which is called ADE. That's antibody-dependent enhancement. It's a technical term, but it means that if you use mRNA structures, DNA structures or RNA structures, to enhance, quote unquote, the human immune system, what you might very well end up doing is to degrade the human immune system, because the human immune system then becomes organized, systematized to respond to an RNA structure, which is very much like new variants of the coronavirus, but not exactly like it. And then what happens is that this particular part of your immune system, and this is not being talked about in mainstream media, but it's completely established in Nature, in all the main peer-reviewed medical journals, the Lancet, and so on. The particular part of your natural immune system connects to the RNA of the virus and creates a more dangerous form of the virus that is partly resistant to the thing you have put in yourself. We have seen this with antibiotics, by the way, as well,
indeed,
with bacteria.
Of course.
This is maybe something the viewers might relate to. It's somewhat related. It's a slightly different process, but it's the same idea. And this is the long-term danger of the vaccine. So short-term, we know that they are not effective because they are already responding, whatever their effectiveness was, they're responding to previous variants of the virus. Then they have the mRNA of the spike protein, which is toxic. Then they have the nanoparticles, which spread across your body and connect to all kinds of organic parts of your body, which may cause all kinds of blood clots and heart attacks and so on. But finally, the most importantly, there is the detrimental effect on your immune system. And all of this for a virus with the same mortality as the flu. So it's ludicrous to take the vaccine. It was criminal and disastrous and inexcusable for governments to push it on people. And I think what we're going to see in the coming year or two, this is not over yet, because the powers that have implemented this on us, big pharma, big tech, big government, they are going to fight a battle to legitimize these measures in hindsight. So my prediction is we're going to see more lockdowns, we're going to see more vaccination programs, only to legitimize the fact that they pushed it in previous years. And that's a very frightening thing. We know from history, you're a historian, we know that whenever regimes knew they were falling apart, they were all in the decline, they would use the most extreme tactics.
That's when they're the most dangerous,
to legitimize their rule. So I think we're heading for some serious years, some serious times ahead. That's why I'm really excited my book is coming out in English, because I think the Netherlands has been a front runner in this debate. I really think the Netherlands has been much more progressive, as it were, I mean, much more truth-seeking than other countries. And that's also why I really hope that people will continue to research things for themselves and not just trust the science or trust the mainstream media, because that's a very irrational thing to do.
Well, Thierry, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure. I hope this is the first of many interviews that we'll do together. The English version of The Corona Conspiracy will be published shortly in the United States by Amsterdam Books. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, stay dangerous.